What is going on, everybody? It's the Franz, and we're here for XFL Week number 2 analysis and my thoughts on everything that happened from Week 2. DC versus New York, Tampa Bay versus Seattle, LA versus Dallas, and Houston versus St. Louis. 4 games. 2 to me were pretty good. 1 that was sloppy as can be, and 1 that started slow but picked up towards the end, which I think all of them did, outside, of course, the first game of the week, which of course was a blowout, a shutout, and everything in between. My thoughts on the player of the week, the team of the week, and the dud letdown of the week, which would of course be the team that had promised the week before and just fell flat on their faces. You probably know who this is, but we will get into that here in a second. First game of the week was the DC Defenders defending the DMV again, taking on the New York Guardians, coming off that bludgeoning of the Tampa Bay Vipers. Did not work out this time for the New York Guardians as they get squashed 27-0. Cardale Jones goes 23 of 37 for 276 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick though, so that's not the best you can do. Of course, the DC Defenders were the first team to try and successfully hit the double forward pass, even though it wasn't a forward pass to a forward pass. It was a shovel pass, a lateral, then another forward pass. They did attempt another double forward pass, an actual double forward pass without a lateral, later in the game after they scored the last touchdown to try and make it 30-0. Unfortunately, that one was incomplete. They were also the first team to go for the 3-point play. We did have a successful 3-point play in this week, happening in Game 3. We'll talk about that later. Matt McGloin, after having a fantastic week last week, went 8 of 19 for 44 yards and was benched in the fourth quarter after throwing 2 picks and pretty much shredding his team on an interview halfway as we went through half 1 to half 2. At halftime, Diana Massini, who was on the sideline for the ESPN, which, by the way, ESPN at least realized that, hey, having one person on the sideline is a really dumb idea. So they had Diana Massini on the New York side, and they had, I don't remember who it was, another guy on the DC Defenders side, which was very fucking smart because these people shouldn't be running back and forth from each side trying to get interviews. One person for each side, how hard is that? But he said that they needed to pretty much throw out the entire game plan and re-game plan in 10 minutes. Yes, half times are 10 minutes, which is absolutely fantastic. You don't have to sit there and wait or go make a sandwich, take a shower, take the kids to school, pick the kids up from school, or pick the kids up from daycare in the time it takes for an NFL halftime to happen. He was benched for Williams, who went 4 for 8 and 50% completion and 51 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, nothing. He was a 70.3 passer rating, while Matt McGloin was at 10.1. The boy Eli Rogers lost his mother last week, and he went out there and had himself a hell of a game. 5 receptions, 49 yards, 25 yards was his longest, averaging 9.8 yards per carry. Tompkins had 6 for 9 on receptions at 92 yards, and Ross, the big player for the week for the DC Defenders, with 4 receptions and 94 yards. His longest was 40. Many targets for Cardale Jones. The dude went out there and gave you a hell of a game on the running side. Pumphrey had 12 attempts at 52 yards. Presley had 32 yards on 11 attempts. And Jones had 1 attempt for 14 yards. On the New York side, Tim Cook, Williams, and Victor had 15 attempts between each other, 39, 16, and 16 overall. On the defensive side of the ball, the New York Guardians did get that 1 interception, 0 sacks, compared to Johnson had 1.5, Bromley had 1 sack, and Barnes had the other part of that half sack. 2 interceptions for the DC Defenders. If I'm correct, 1 was a pick 6. Special teams, nothing really special. I'm hoping we can eventually see a run back, especially with these kickoff rules, especially. I'm still waiting for somebody to get that hole and go down the middle, because all the big runs that we've had are going from the kickoff have been to the side. I'm waiting for somebody to have that run where it goes up the middle. There's a big, huge hole because of their blockers, and they just go, and the only person left there to stop them is the kicker. That is probably going to be a long time before we see that, but who knows? DC defenders came out there and made the New York Guardians look like average at best. Last week, the New York Guardians looked like they were just going to be one of those top 4 teams, one of those top 2 teams, along with DC or St. Louis. St. Louis and DC right now, coming out of week 2, are your 2 teams going to the playoffs. They are the best teams we have. Tampa Bay absolutely was okay, but last week they were terrible. This week they were improved, but not much. We'll talk about Tampa Bay in a minute because they were game number 2. And Matt McGloin, I don't know what's going on with Matt McGloin, but they have got to figure him out. So that is DC going up, defending the DMV. They have to go on the road next week. So next week, DC moves on to Los Angeles. They will be facing the Wildcats on a Sunday at 6 p.m. on FS1, whereas New York on Sunday as well will be going to St. Louis. So St. Louis will have its first game on ESPN at 3 p.m. That bowl is going to be freaking raucous. I cannot wait to see the crowd shots in St. Louis. They are the high, like St. Louis Battle Hot games are going to be probably the highest rated games out there, because this is the only team not with an NFL franchise after what happened a couple years ago when the Rams moved to Los Angeles and they lost the team. St. Louis is going to be a big reason why the XFL probably stays around, because you have football in St. Louis. If St. Louis goes out there next week and beats down the Guardians and wins on home turf, St. Louis is going to be a pivotal point for the XFL. But next week, both of these teams will be on the road, and we'll talk about that next week. But let's get ready for game number 2. The Seattle Dragons took on the Tampa Bay Vipers and beat them 17-9. This was Seattle's first game with the Dragons in CenturyLink Field. They have a nice little tradition starting at with Seattle, that instead of raising the 12th flag, they have a Dragons cauldron to light at every home game. And there's only going to be 5 of these, and this was number 1. They went out there and they took it to Tampa Bay. This was a pretty decent game after the first quarter. Brandon Silvers did all the snaps for the Seattle Dragons with 7 of 18 for 91 yards, a touchdown, and 1 interception. On the other side, Tampa Bay, this is their biggest problem, is they have a quarterback problem. Aaron Murray was out for the game because of injury after what happened last week. So instead of doing the smart thing and using Quentin Flowers as their main guy, they went with Cornelius, who went 16 of 27 for 154 yards, which is awesome that he did that. He had the most for them. But it just seems like this team clicks when they have Quentin Flowers in the game. He went 3 of 7, 18 yards, and 1 interception. Both players had a pick. Quentin Flowers' pick was the most egregious one because he threw a pick, threw the ball, and immediately it was snatched out of the air. He was in the end zone. He threw it light. He didn't throw it over. He just threw it as low as he could. It was grabbed out of midair, ran in, and was in for a touchdown immediately. Now, running game, Patrick for the Vipers went 14 attempts for 73 yards. Smith went 11 attempts for 46 yards, and Flowers went 5 attempts for 15 yards. On the Seattle side, only 3 people held the ball, as Williams went 11 for 45, Farrell went 10 for 45, and Gardner went 10 for 27. The running game in the XFL is going to be a mixed bag for the early stages, even though the next game had a really good running game towards the end of the game. But This was one of those that shows Tampa Bay wasn't as bad as they were last week. They actually went out there. They had the lead. It was 9-3, I believe it was, at one point after a pick six, which Tampa Bay is the only team coming out of this week who has yet to have an offensive touchdown. That is something they hope to rectify next week. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, again, you had 2 sacks for the Tampa Bay Vipers. You had 3 half sacks and a sack and a half for the Seattle Dragons. So that's 3 sacks. Yeah, 3 sacks. I'm sorry, 4 sacks. There was another one with Thompson. Interceptions, of course, you had the pick 6 by McFadden for the Tampa Bay Vipers. And, of course, there were 3 picks for the Seattle Dragons. Right? Yeah, 3 picks for the Seattle Dragons. And special teams, nothing special there. So Seattle won their first game. It was fantastic. The CenturyLink Field looked packed. 29,000 people packed into CenturyLink Field. That, of course, is an attendance record for the XFL, as I'm sure that will be broken this coming Sunday, coming up with St. Louis and New York. But these 2 teams had themselves a hell of a game. Next week in Week 3, Tampa Bay is at home. They take on the Houston Roughnecks. I don't see Tampa Bay winning that game for the simple fact is Houston is on a roll. Houston has one of the best quarterbacks in the league outside of Cardale Jones and the person he went up against this week. And Seattle, still at home this coming week, will be taking on the Dallas Renegades and Landry Jones. At 2 o'clock for the Houston and Tampa Bay. Seattle and Dallas will go head-to-head on Fox at 5 p.m. So that is that. Now, I'm watching XFL, and I'm sitting here wondering, why does Game 2 start immediately after Game 1? There needs to be, in my opinion, a hour or half an hour break in between the two, because what if the first game goes to overtime? What if the first game happens to go to overtime? Yes, I know they have this back and forth, this shootout style, which we haven't seen yet. I don't think we're going to see many times at all. I mean, we had a couple of games where it looked like if that team scored, we would have ourselves a overtime game coming down to the wire, but that hasn't happened yet. I don't see it happening. I'm hoping it doesn't happen for the simple fact is it's just I don't like the overtime. But what if they go to overtime? Do you want people to divvy away from Game 1 to watch Game 2? Do you want people to miss out on Game 2 because you're watching overtime on Game 1? I think they need at least a half an hour to an hour between the 2 games. That's just my opinion. So if Game 1 starts at 2, have the other game start at 5. Or start at 6 or 5:30. Yes, I know. The first week of the XFL, the first game, DC versus Seattle, went over the 3 hour mark. All the other games have come to 3 hours or close to under 3 hours. This week, a lot of the games were finished under 3 hours, but I wouldn't want to risk it because you don't want to have something happen that keeps, say, Seattle and Tampa Bay going at it. And they're in overtime. It's a long overtime because each team continues to score, and your other team's going on, and people will want to stay close to because ratings do still matter. I mean, they're not getting huge-ass ratings that you usually see, but ratings still should matter, and you don't want to have people tuning into your other game until the first game finishes because that's going to be a huge draw, but it's also going to hurt your other game because people aren't watching that one because they're watching to see who's going to win the first game of the day. That's just my opinion. Give me a second here, and we're going to be getting ready for game number 3. Game number 3 was the Dallas Renegades taking on the LA Wildcats. And this was a good game here in the second half. The first half, neither one of these teams looked like they could score. LA and Landry Jones and Josh Johnson were the 2 quarterbacks, and this was their first games. Landry Jones and Josh Johnson both missed last week. And I think the reason that LA did so poor in the second half against Houston Roughnecks last week is because the quarterback was not their starter. He hardly had any reps, and he just ran out of gas. This week, Landry Jones, even though they won this game, even came out and said that right after the game was over, is that we won, but I played probably as bad as you could probably play. LA, to me, I feel like when they play next week, they are going to have a much better game than they did this week. They're going to be much better off. I know they got to play DC, which is going to be a hard game for them because it is the DC Defenders, and we'll see how DC does on the road. But there is going to be another home game. I can see LA. Josh Johnson will have a full week on the center, a full week of practice, a full week of reps, and he's going to probably go out there and give LA a better game. Same thing with Landry Jones, who went out here. Both guys went. Landry Jones went 28 of 40 for 305 yards. I think that is the record for the XFL this year. I could be wrong. I might be wrong. I think PJ Walker did something last week. 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. Josh Johnson himself went 18 for 34, 196 yards for 2 touchdowns and 0 picks. So, yes, the Dallas Renegades, who only scored 3 field goals last week, went out there and scored a touchdown. And I think they had a couple rushing touchdowns. They had 2 rushing touchdowns, yes. Artis Payne is a candidate for, in my opinion, player of the week. It comes down to Cardell Jones, Cameron Payne, Artis Payne, and PJ Walker for player of the week. Artis Payne, if he does not have his 14 attempts for 99 yards, the Dallas Roughnecks do not win this game. He had 2 crucial touchdowns towards the end of this game. If he does not have those 2 crucial touchdowns, I don't think they converted. I think they converted 1 point. But the 12 to 14 points they would have had would not be on the board, and they would be losing 18 to 13. Just saying. The Dallas Renegades had the game, like I said, the first half of this game, it was a tale of 2 games. The first half, both of these teams, it was 3-3 at halftime, if I'm correct. After those 3 points from each side, neither one of these teams could score. It didn't get interesting until we got towards the end of the game, which is fine. You had Spruce pick up a touchdown, which was fantastic. He got Johnson threw a laser to him. Spruce caught both touchdowns. One, which was a deep bomb, 44 yards, if I'm correct. Yeah, 44 yards for a beautiful touchdown. And those were the 2 touchdowns that they got they had 2 touchdowns, right? Yeah, 2 touchdowns and then a couple field goals. Now, this game was one of those ones that the LA Wildcats were trying to get back into it, could have possibly got back into it, and just bad pass here, bad pass there, and it was over. Dallas wins. LA could not win this game. However, they went out there and they came oh so close. This one was one of those that tells me that this might be the last time that, if it wasn't for the fact that we're playing DC next week, this could be the last time for a while that the LA Wildcats lose a game. Because I think Josh Johnson is going to go out there and he's going to ball. He's going to go out there. He's going to show you that he should be contending for the MVP. He should be contending for everything. It's just they need to get the reps in. LA, yes, going down 0-2, which you don't want to go to 0-2, especially since there's only 8 games left. But if they go out there and they go 8 straight, if they throw off 8 straight and make it to the playoffs, it's all going to be because this game right here was the turning point for this team. This was just one of those games that both teams could, because Dallas has, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, there was ever a preseason favorite. There should be no preseason favorites for a new league. Because we don't know what these guys are going to do mesh together. But Tampa Bay, for some reason, who hasn't been good at all, and Dallas, who showed some signs here as well. Both of these teams showed you that probably by the end of this season, we could see Dallas and LA battling Houston for one of those two spots. Plain and simple. We'll have to wait and see what happens next week. As we know, DC comes into LA to take on the Wildcats, and the Dallas Renegades take on hold on, I went to the wrong week. And Dallas Renegades go to Seattle. So this is going to be a tough game for next week's going to be a tough game for both of these two teams. But LA's got the home field Hopefully the LA fans will come out and support their team. If you went to this game, which was kind of funny because you're watching this on TV, Dallas is up on the LA Wildcats, and you just see fans walking away, leaving because it looks like the game is over. Then LA goes out there and they scores a huge touchdown, and fans should have been getting back to their seat because this was a good one towards the end. Defensively on this team, let's see here. Sacks, we had ourselves 2 for the LA Wildcats, and you had 2 for the Dallas Renegades. Interception, of course, you had 2 for the Wildcats and 0 for the Dallas Renegades. Not much else you can say about that. This was one of those games that left more to be like. This game was one of those that if you're a fan of Dallas and you're a fan of LA, yes, Dallas might have won, but both of these teams left more to be desired on the field. These two teams can go out there, both quarterbacks get under center, get all the reps they can. By this time next week, they are probably going to have themselves a better game. The top 3 players of the week, the top 3 quarterbacks of this league are St. Louis, Houston, and DC. But LA and Dallas are right behind them. Seattle, Tampa Bay, and New York are the 3 bottom teams of this league right now. Yes, Seattle might have won, but it wasn't a pretty game, and in my opinion, they were lucky to win. Next week they got a tougher task, and I'm sure it's going to be hard. Next week, I'm hoping to see a good game out of LA with DC. It's going to be the first time we see DC on the road, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So 25-18 was the final. Let's move on to the final game of the week. And what was, as I'm sure everyone else will say, was the game of the week. The St. Louis Battlehawks fall to the Houston Roughnecks in a very close 28-24 final. This was fantastic. Ta'amu and Walker went out there and put on a show. Ta'amu actually outpassed Walker when it came to yardage with a 30 of 37 for 284 yards, whereas Walker was 20 of 31 for 170 yards with 3 touchdowns. Both players had 3 touchdowns. That is fantastic. Passer rating of 111 and passer rating of 103. Butler for the Roughnecks had 7 attempts for 28 yards and 1 touchdown. And Ta'amu had 8 attempts, 32 yards for a touchdown himself. So both of these teams had 4 touchdowns. The difference was I believe, a field goal and maybe a couple of conversions here and there. This was the best game of the week. P.J. Walker, Ta'amu showed you that they are 2 of the best quarterbacks in this league. And honestly, Ta'amu, Walker might not be in the XFL after next season if there is a second season, which I'm always going to put that if there until it's confirmed. Now, my player of the week coming out of this is still going to be Artis Payne. I was thinking it was going to be Cardale Jones, but that was last week, and I don't really want to give 2 people. No, P.J. Walker was last week, that's right. But Artis Payne, the reason I'm giving Artis Payne the player of the week is simple. He was the reason his team won their game. Artis Payne went out there and broke for 99 yards. And he went out there and got 2 back-to-back touchdowns that sealed the deal for the Dallas Renegades. This was the game of the week. These 2 teams were balanced. I'm hoping and praying that maybe, just maybe, this could happen to be the championship game coming into Houston. Why? Because these 2 teams went out there and showed you what good fucking football can be outside of the NFL. They went out there, busted their asses, and gave you some great fucking football. 2 picks to none. Ta'amu threw 2 picks compared to Houston's 0. That also is a nail in the coffin right there. This one could have went either way, though. This is one of those it could have went either way type of games. Now, on the defensive side, as we know, 1 interception for the St. Louis Battlehawks and 1 sack. Sacks on the other side, there was 3 total. just a balanced game between both teams. Not much else you can say other than these two teams went out there and honestly, there is nobody in the East, in the West right now that I say is on Houston's level. PJ Walker, their defense, his weapons. I think that Houston is going to be your first XFL champions the way this is going. I like DC because I'm a Ohio State boy and Cardell Jones is on the DC Defenders, and just the fact that they have been playing so much good football as well. I just don't think anybody can beat the Dallas Renegades, the Houston Roughnecks. I could be wrong. I feel like the Houston Roughnecks might be the Orlando Apollos from the AAF of the XFL, just because they are well balanced. PJ Walker is a highlight. People are saying he should be MVP. I would put him up there with Cardell Jones for the MVP talk. You can't just have one person say he's MVP. Cardell Jones has come out and balled as well. Cannot wait to see what happens in Week 3. As we know, the St. Louis Battlehawks will be hosting the New York Guardians, so I can't wait to see what they do in the Dome. And the Houston Roughnecks, of course, are going on the road to take on the Tampa Bay Vipers. Vipers are probably going to go 0-3 unless something changes. The biggest thing that the Vipers have to do is get yourselves a better quarterback. I'm going to give you my final thoughts here in 1 minute. My final thoughts on XFL Week 2. Week 2, there was a lot more sloppiness. Week 1 looked like this was going to be flawless. This was going to be one of those. It was definitely Week 1 was lightning in a bottle. Everything seemed crisp. Everything seemed great. Everything seemed firm, and it seemed like they were going to have themselves a hell of a fucking league. Week 2, outside of Game 1 for the DC Defenders for sure, and Game 4, which was, of course, the game of the week. The team of the week for me is the DC Defenders, just because of how they handled business against the New York Guardians, and the New York Guardians are the dud of the week after giving us. Anybody who was a New York fan coming out of Week 1, you felt like you finally had a team that was going to be just fantastic going into this new league. You're going to have somebody to cheer for. You're going to have somebody who actually looks like a legitimate football team. And then you get to Week 2, and they look like the Jets and Giants in the winter/spring time. So the XFL. I didn't expect them to have a flawless campaign for the second week in a row. There's going to be flaws. There's going to be sloppiness. You can't go into this expecting a crisp, clean football week every single week. If we get one game like St. Louis versus Houston every single week, they're doing something right. DC look like a team that's going to be hard to beat. Houston, St. Louis, yes, they look like teams that are going to be hard to beat. It would not surprise me when we get to the playoffs at the end of April that it's St. Louis and DC on the east side, Houston and I'm going to say Houston and either Dallas or LA. I think it's going to come down to Dallas or LA for that second spot. I don't think the who's the other one? I don't think the LA. Seattle. I don't think Seattle's going to make it to the playoffs this year. I just don't think they have everything there. Houston looks unstoppable. DC looks unstoppable. The LA Wildcats look like they improved. However, like their defense was way better than their offense. Their offense is where it needs to improve, and that's only going to improve with repetition and time. After Pepper Johnson was fired by the LA Wildcats, they came out and their defense looked like it was a totally different defense. Like they had a complete different, like they just went completely different. So if I had to pick one, I would probably say that Josh Johnson and the LA Wildcats will probably take over and win and become the second team. And I'm picking Houston and St. Louis in a rematch of Week 2 in Houston Stadium, because that's where the first championship game is going to be, and we have ourselves a fantastic championship game. Now, my pick will probably change next week, especially if Houston and St. Louis go out there and lay eggs, or DC goes out there. It's going to be tough. The East, if it comes down to DC and St. Louis, it's going to be tough. Both teams have to play each other twice in each other's home city. So as we go on, of course, I'll be making different picks unless I say, oh, well, DC went out there and they kicked ass, so I'm going to say them too. Houston goes out there. If they blow the lid off if the Vipers go out there and contain PJ Walker and go out there and look like a totally different team and make Houston look like inept them compared to what they had the last 2 weeks, things might change. But until then, I don't see anyone in East or West beating Houston outside of possibly DC and St. Louis if St. Louis got another shot. Because that game could have went anywhere to any one of them. Now, people are probably going to sit there and be like, "Oh, look at Seattle, and look at Tampa Bay. They played like shit this week. Oh, look at the XFL. They have shitty teams. It's a fucking sports league. Not every fucking team is going to be fantastic. Not every fucking sports team that you're going to have, and not every team in the league is going to be a championship contender team. You have 8 teams. Only 4 get in, 2 from each side. So 2 teams on each side have to lose to get other teams in. There's always going to be 2 teams better than the other 2 on each side. Now, like I said, LA looked like they improved. The Dallas Renegades, after their running game opened up, they looked like they were a better team. New York, Tampa Bay looked like shit. Seattle felt like just because they were playing inferior competition, they looked like a better team, even though I don't think that's going to last. So I'm putting it down right now. Seattle is not making the playoffs at this time. Brandon Silvers, I don't see him being a viable quarterback in the long run. DC, St. Louis for the East, Houston, and it's a toss-up between Dallas and LA right now. New York and Tampa Bay, I think, are done. I don't think they have a chance. But things will change in Week 3, and that's going to be happening this Saturday, and Sunday. But until then, my name is The France. Hit that subscribe button, comment down below, like or dislike this video. Find me on Twitter at The France Club. Find me on twitch.tv/The France Club. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for AEW. Until then, my name is The France, and I'll see you guys later.